Very few villains have managed to bring the legendary Rick Grimes to his knees, and even fewer have managed to leave a lasting impact on the Walking Dead franchise overall. But Philip Blake, aka the Governor, and Negan Smith, the King of the Saviors, have both managed to accomplish this impressive set of feats. Both are also accomplished leaders of iconic communities, with their own cult followings online. But what if these two men met and fought each other on the undead battlefield? How exactly would such an altercation go down, and who would be the victor in most situations? That's right, I'm going to break down each character's weapons, physical stats, combat skills, and intangibles in order to answer that very question. And by the end of this stupid power scaling video, you'll come to see who the big bad of the Walking Dead universe really is. So sit back and relax, because this is going to be one bloody fucking video. In any conflict between two opposing forces where violence is being exchanged between both parties, the tide of battle can be heavily influenced, and even won, by the very weapons being utilized by said respective parties. As such, I've decided to compare and contrast the weapons used by Negan and the Governor. I've hand-selected the most iconic weapons, along with their most commonly used weapons for this matchup. If you disagree with my choice of weapons, simply let me know in the comments section. Of the two men, Negan has a greater diversity of weapons to choose from, so I can see why some would disagree with this assortment of delicious jams and goodies. That being said, let's begin with Negan Smith's signature weapon, Lucille, the thirsty vampire bat, which is a girthy wooden bat that is wrapped in barbed wire. It can break bones while also lacerating and puncturing its victims. At close range, this bat is a serious threat. It outranges any knife available to both men, and it takes even less skill to effectively utilize than a knife, as edge alignment isn't really an issue for a blunt weapon. It doesn't need to be sharpened either, and it definitely won't get stuck in a target. Furthermore, it's incredibly intimidating, as anyone with a brain would know that death via baseball bat is not quick or painless. With all that being said, Lucille is not an effective weapon in tight spaces, nor is it a viable weapon against firearms, despite it magically body-blocking Rosita's assassination attempt of Negan. Like, seriously, somebody get Lucille a job with the Secret Service. That said, Lucille isn't the most portable weapon either, and Negan is always carrying her into battle. This can certainly be a detriment to the King of the Saviors. While Philip doesn't wield a barbaric club, he does possess a standard K-bar combat knife, which would definitely be more effective than Lucille in tight spaces. But then again, Negan also has a large 17-inch sawback knife, which is definitely more imposing than a K-bar. It's clear to me, insofar as close quarters combat without firearms is concerned, Negan has a clear and distinct edge over the leader of Woodbury. Now, when it comes to handguns, Negan has used a Desert Eagle before and a Springfield 1911. I'm also certain he's used others as well, but these are the cool ones. That said, I'ma go with the more practical of the two, being the 1911, which is objectively better for combat situations, due to a myriad of issues which I just don't want to get into. If you want to use the Eagle for your own comparison, feel free to do so. The 1911 fires .45 ACP rounds with a magazine capacity of 7 rounds. You could load an additional round into the chamber directly, if you'd like, to bump that figure up to 8. If this 1911 is utilizing 9mm rounds, it can hold up to 9 to 10 rounds. The Governor, on the other hand, is seen rocking a Beretta 92 SB, which fires a 9mm Luger with a standard magazine capacity of 15 fucking rounds. This ultimately means that Philip will have to reload less often than Negan in the middle of a firefight, which is a big advantage. And while the .45 ACP has more stopping power, the 9mm actually has more penetrating power. This ultimately helps to negate Negan's cover, turning it into concealment instead of a safe haven. It also makes suppressive fire more effective. So, generally speaking, the Governor has a clear edge in close-range firearms, albeit the edge isn't overwhelming, as one bullet, regardless of the caliber, can end this altercation in an instant. Speaking of firearms, let's talk about Negan's MAC-10, which is a direct Easter egg referencing the movie Escape from New York, which by the way is crazy. That being said, this fully automatic submachine gun comes with a 30-round magazine that can fire either 9mm Lugers or .45 ACP rounds. It has an insane fire rate and is incredibly portable and effective in close quarters combat. But all of this fails to match the sheer dominance of the Governor's Steyr AUG A1 assault rifle. This iconic bullpup rifle comes equipped with a 1.5 times magnification scope, straight from the factory. It also fires the 5.56 NATO round, which is definitely better than any 9mm or .45 ACP round, while also possessing a magazine capacity of 30 rounds. The AUG is more accurate at range than the Uzi, and it packs more of a punch as well, and the bullpup design allows it to be incredibly effective in tight spaces as well, thus neutralizing the MAC-10's greatest trait. Truth be told, the Governor dominates in any medium to long-range engagement with regards to firearms. Overall, I'd ultimately judge this category as a stalemate. Both men will not be carrying a ton of magazines on them, so ammunition will be scarce. It is highly likely that both men will be alive once they run out of bullets. But then again, they might not ever get to the point where close-ranged melee weapons are being used. How such a confrontation pans out is ultimately dependent on the field of battle. When it comes to primary firearms, the Governor dominates. Both men are relative when it comes to handguns or secondary firearms, with Philip holding a noticeable edge, and Negan absolutely stomps at melee range. Hence, Negan stomps in a confined environment, whereas Philip dominates in any open area. In any arena where there is a mixture of open space and confined spaces, both men stand a good chance of winning. Considering how often characters in The Walking Dead get up close and personal, it would make sense to compare and contrast the physical stats of these two villains. And considering that we're dealing with fiction, it would also be important to determine just how durable these two men are, as it's very possible that each of them can survive being shot while still being able to continue fighting for a prolonged period of time. With that being said, Negan is 6'1" and Philip is 6'2". I couldn't find official heights based on the TV series, so I simply went with the heights of both respective actors. That said, both men are basically the same height. Neither has a notable reach advantage, and both men seem to have a similar build as well, meaning they're likely in the same weight class. When it comes to stamina, both Negan and the Governor have demonstrated just how large their gas tanks are. Even though I'm only using Savior Negan for this comparison, an older and nerfed Negan had the stamina to rescue Judith and a dog during a blizzard, and he did this with an injured leg. Considering that Savior Negan is most likely to be Negan's physical prime on the show, we can hence safely assume that he has similar or even greater levels of stamina than the Blizzard feat. The Governor, on the other hand, also has great stamina. This man outright survived fighting an entire horde of walkers in a confined space, only to then catch up to Andrea on foot, taking her back to Woodbury afterwards. While we have more reasons to believe that Negan has a larger gas tank, we can safely assert this advantage is meaningless, as their fight will not last long enough to tire out both characters. Both Negan and Philip are also decently durable. Negan basically got concussed by Rick after getting his head smashed in by a metal object, and he recovered fairly quickly, despite being floored. An older version of Negan also managed to tank hits from fucking Beta, who's a monster in his own right. Negan also managed to fight despite having a hand injured by a misfired handgun. The Governor, on the other hand, has taken some serious hits from Merle, Rick, and Michonne. Philip has also been shot and managed to fight with this injury, eventually defeating Rick, despite being ambushed by Rick. But one aspect of Philip's durability that needs to be addressed is that he does have a physical weakness that can be exploited, and that weakness is his damaged eye. Overall, I'd personally give the durability edge to Negan, albeit the edge is almost negligible. When it comes to strength, both men are also ridiculously strong. Philip tossed Michonne around like a rag doll despite being in a disadvantageous position, and Negan literally crushed a man's windpipe with his bare hands. Such a feat requires roughly 135 to 180 newtons of force, or 30 to 40 pounds of pressure, which is difficult for the average person to replicate, especially as a sustained effort. This is a feat Philip failed to replicate, as he could not break Rick's trachea. But to be fair to the governor, the man has demonstrated similar or even greater levels of strength, especially when fighting walkers with his bare fucking hands. Both men also show the ability to stab through walker skulls with blades, which is actually an impressive display of strength. Overall, I'd have to say that both men are equal in terms of physical strength. Both men also seem to be equal in terms of speed and reaction time. All things being considered, I'd say that Negan has a slight edge in physical stats, due in part to his stamina and durability. But if we were to consider composite Negan, applying his feats from the Tekken 7 trailer, then clearly Negan stops as he managed to knock out Kazuya, who tanked a skyscraper level attack. Okay. Alright, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna use Negan from fucking Tekken. Relax. The single greatest predictor of victory in any conflict between two warriors is almost always going to be their skill set. Now sure, sometimes being super strong will trump any skill, just as having a massive advantage in weaponry can achieve the same result. Case in point, you could be a professional MMA fighter that's not gonna help you beat a Kodiak bear without weaponry. And the same could be said with spears. It doesn't matter how good you are with using such a tool, because if someone's using a shotgun against you, you're kinda fucked. But generally speaking, when both combatants are relative to each other in physical stats, and with regards to weaponry, the individual with more skills and a higher battle IQ will win. At least they'll win more times than not. With that said, let's go ahead and look at Negan. This guy almost always manages to get out of sticky situations. He's excellent at utilizing psychological warfare, and he's also a decent brawler. His aim is also pretty damn good. And unlike Philip, he knows of the Walker Guts technique. The Governor, on the other hand, is also a great fighter, showing the ability to disarm someone with a knife, which is much harder than you might think it is. He's also gotten out of sticky situations, but not nearly as much as Negan. And he's typically been saved or aided when ambushed. Be that as it may, Philip does have a rage boost unlike any other character besides maybe Rick and Morgan. And when he's under the influence of such bloodlust, he'll fight in an unpredictably savage manner, even biting off people's fucking fingers. His aim is also more consistently sharp than Negan's. But Negan is tactically sounder than Philip, often looking to outsmart his enemies even when he knows he can just overpower them. He's also amazingly good at reading people, rarely being fooled by the charm of individuals. Negan does, however, have a psychological weakness that must be mentioned. If Lucille were ever to get damaged, in any way, he will get flustered, but this never seems to distract him in a seriously debilitating manner. Negan also has another notable weakness, being his overconfidence and inability to not talk shit during a fight, a weakness that has kept him from securing easy wins. Whereas the Governor will freeze or lose his mind when Penny or Megan are threatened. Philip also gets tunnel vision when fighting, causing him to lose situational awareness. This, of course, cost him his life. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that Negan likely has more combat experience than Philip, due to the fact that he survived in the apocalypse for far longer. All things being considered, I'd say that Negan has a slight edge in combat skills, simply because of his ability to stay level-headed and also due to his better tactics. Philip does, however, pose a serious threat. He has better or more consistent aim while also possessing better ranged weaponry. So we're finally here, the final verdict. Let's quickly recap each category. In terms of weaponry, both men are stalemated. When it comes to physical stats, Negan holds a slight edge. When it comes to combat skills, Negan also holds a slight edge. As such, I believe that Negan would defeat the Governor in most situations. And I'd say that the ratio would be 6 out of 10 confrontations. If the battle between these two begins in a confined space, Negan would dominate. If the altercation begins in an open area with no cover, Philip would likely dominate, although Negan's battle IQ could allow him to close the distance, thus improving his odds of victory. In a scenario where there is plenty of open space and also plenty of closed spaces, I'd wager that Negan will be intelligent enough to get Philip to chase him into a more confined area, at which point Negan would likely dominate. But regardless of the circumstances, Negan would not have an easy fight here. Philip has great weaponry and has very good aim. His savage fighting style and relative levels of strength and stamina would also make this a deeply contested battle. But overall, I'd give Negan the majority of the victories. Anyways, if you enjoy this sort of content, please like, share, and fucking subscribe. Also, remember that you may opine anytime if you feel so inclined down in the comments section. I'm Captain Gold and hope to see you in my next Gold Standard video.